Hi, everyone. I'm Adrienne Gould-Davis, and I am, as usual, honored to welcome you back to the Momentum Boost for an incredibly special event in honor of the Jewish American Heritage Month. You know, for hundreds of years, the Jewish people have been integral to the fabric of American life. Our lives, our family histories, they're part of the story of this nation, and our Jewish role models, well, they've shaped pop culture, politics, healthcare, sports, entertainment, and more. And yet, as vital as we are, lurking in the shadows, and frankly, these days, right up front, anti-Semitism remains ubiquitous. And in recent years, its rise has led to vitriol, to violence, and unspeakable tragedy. So even as we celebrate our many successes, we have to face the facts. Anti-Semitism is still here, and it impacts us all. And how can we unite against this hate? How can we take action for ourselves and for our families and invite our non-Jewish neighbors to join us in this fight? Tonight, you're going to meet two of the minds behind the Foundation to Combat Antisemitism's viral online movement, which embraces the blue square emoji as a unifying symbol of support for Jews. They're going to tell the story of its creation. They're going to reveal how it's changed their own lives for the better. And they're going to share concrete ideas for how we can all join this movement. So I'd like to begin by first introducing our guests. First is Matthew Berger, and he is the Executive Director of the Foundation to Combat Antisemitism. Matthew oversees the Foundation's programs to raise awareness about hatred against Jews and to monitor and analyze anti-Semitism on social media. As Executive Director, Matthew is leading the launch of Stand Up to Jewish Hate, which is a multi-platform advertising campaign to educate non-Jews about modern anti-Semitism and to empower them to address hate in their communities. And before joining FCAS, Matthew was Hillel International's Vice President for External Affairs and Campus Preparedness. And he was overseeing programs that addressed anti-Semitism, anti-Israel activity, and security concerns on college campuses around the world. And also, Shari Schraber is the Managing Director of MindShare. She leads MindShare's work with the Foundation to Combat Antisemitism, and she is the mind behind the first ever national media campaign to stand up to Jewish hate. You know, over the course of Shari's 25-year advertising career, she's worked at Starcom in Chicago, at Fallon in Minneapolis. She's had clients including Miller Brewing, Procter & Gamble, Maytag, Polaroid, Citibank, Target, and the Jewish people now. I'd like to welcome Matthew and Shari. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Thanks for having us.
So just an absolute honor to have you here. I'd like to begin, if it's okay, with a question for both of you. I think what I'll do is I'll give it to you, and then I'll ask for Matthew to address it first, and then Shari will go to you after that. So here's my first question. We know that Jews have been persecuted in nearly every country that they've settled in for thousands of years. This is not new. But I think we erroneously thought that America was immune. And I imagine that this campaign was created largely as a reaction to this disappointing trend. So could you please speak to the campaign, to Mr. Kraft's involvement, and also to the evolution of this movement?
Sure. Well, thanks again for having us, and really appreciate the opportunity and to join my friend and colleague Shari on this. We've worked so closely together over the past year, and it's exciting to really share a little bit about what we've done behind the scenes. The Foundation to Combat Anti-Semitism was founded in 2019 by Robert Kraft. And Robert's been a philanthropist for many years, and a lot of his work has been focused on addressing those that have not been well treated or have been victims of disparity. He's focused on LGBTQ support, on fighting for racial justice, both in prison sentencing as well as in health disparities among race. And the Genesis Prize is awarded each year to somebody who is both successful in business pursuits, but also philanthropic. And when Robert received it in 2019, he used the $1 million prize that it comes with to launch the foundation. Because in his words, he started to really look inward and see that while he had been focused on helping those who were less fortunate or being victimized in our country, he was starting to see the Jews were being victimized in our country and felt the need for somebody to address this issue in a really powerful way. So the foundation's been around since 2019. It's actually housed within Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts, where the Patriots play. So I get to work at an NFL stadium, which is pretty cool. And we're focused over the first few years around understanding what anti-Semitism looks like, particularly on social media channels, and analyzing and reporting what the trends are, how social media allows anti-Semites to speak up, to find one another, and to really create environments where people can be targeted based on their Jewish identity. But there was a need to do more, and there was a need to address anti-Semitism in a much bigger way. And one of the things that we've learned over the course of the last year is that more than half of Americans do not think that anti-Semitism is a problem in this country. So there is a question and an issue of awareness. And we fundamentally believe that the problem in this country is not because there's an overwhelming number of anti-Semites, but that there is an overwhelming number of people who aren't seeing anti-Semitism, aren't speaking out when anti-Semitism happens, and aren't empowered to address it the way that we expect people to speak up when they see racism, when they see gender inequality, when they see LGBTQ targeting, Asian hate, any other type of targeting against people for who they are, what they believe, who they love, and so on. So,
Matthew, just a second. Do you
yeah.
have any thoughts about why that is the case? Why, for example, anti-Semitism and is not considered a political agenda?
There's several reasons. I think one is that the Jewish community has not raised anti-Semitism at scale and vocal enough for many, many generations. There was a feeling that the Jewish community settling in the United States, trying to integrate into the American society, did not want to draw attention to themselves and be seen as victims. Also, externally, we know that many people see the Jewish community as monolithically white and privileged, and therefore do not see the Jewish community and the concerns and the targeting of harassment that we receive as on par with the racial, gender, sexual orientation, other types of injustices that we see in this country. And so,
but even after the synagogue shootings, there wasn't a reversal in that?
Unfortunately, we've seen that trend. The trend has been growing over the last 5 years. I think Charlottesville about 5 years ago, then Tree of Life, Poway, and some others have really started to raise the alarm bells. It took a while for the alarm bells to really be loud enough within the Jewish community, and now we hope with our campaign that we're raising it at scale and really educating more people about this issue. And so we really felt the need to educate and empower all Americans to understand what anti-Semitism is, to empower them to be part of the solution, to come to them and not wag fingers, but to really say, we need your support, and to really look for the best in people and ask them to be part with us in the fight against anti-Semitism. And so in doing that, we looked for advertising agencies that could work with us and that could develop a unique campaign. And Wonderman Thompson and MindShare, which Shari represents, is a great example of that. And we've been privileged to work with them to roll this out over the past year.
Before I have Shari answer as well, I'm wondering if we could take a minute to look at a short clip of the campaign, just to put in context for people what it is that you've been working on. I appreciate your response. Let's do that. I'll ask the producers to put up that video. That's powerful. That's extremely powerful. Shari, tell me if you could respond, please, to what Matthew just responded to from your perspective.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I always love joining Matt, having these conversations. And Matt and I have become fast friends over the past year. And he knows that I cry a lot, and I still cry when I see that commercial every time. It could be on TV, I can hear it in the other room, and I cry because not only am I so proud of what we've done, but I'm so excited and like optimistic that we're making progress and trying to just make people aware, to Matt's point, that this is a problem. But I think your question, Adrian, originally was like, why is this happening? And Matt gave a lot of great commentary. I'm just going to amplify that by literally saying one of the biggest problems is social media. And, this is how I've put this into perspective for my agency and people that have worked on this campaign, to like in the very beginning, just like, let's understand what we're dealing with here, people. And this is the example that I've given, the analogy. Okay. In 1930, Hitler used the radio. He used the radio to kill 6 million Jews and 6 million many other innocent people. The radio. What happens today? Some guy with 30 million followers on Twitter says something. Like, what's that going to end like? We have to do something, and social media is a problem. It's Robert Kraft always says this, is someone says something and 30 million people believe it's fact, and they run with it. So it's
I think what you're saying, and the key here is that when a social influencer or a celebrity says something and 60 million people join on, mm-hmm. does that have the same impact as a campaign that was clearly created specifically to address the issue? I mean, do we need influencers who will take up our part?
Exactly, we do. And that's very interesting, Adrian. Led me right to another topic of, we had a lot of influencers across, obviously, Robert Kraft's network of amazing influencers and people he knows, from politicians to celebrities to musicians and everything else. But I think what was really interesting on the media side of it, so on the media side of it, we did these amazing integrations with shows like The Voice with Carson Daly, the Today Show with Harry Smith, interviewing Robert, Kelly Clarkson, and Andy Cohen, actually. So I say those big names for a reason. Mm-hmm. Those people get paid, everything comes out of their mouth, they get paid for. Right. We said to them, we're not going to pay you. We're not going to pay you because we want you to believe in this. And every one of them were like, yes, sign me up. We believe in it. And so when you say, Adrian, that we need influencers, that's exactly right. We need those people to start. Those people have millions of Instagram followers, just as many as the other side do. And so we need to start, coming out and using our voices. And, what Matt is saying is right, is usually, this focus group of one, and, having kids who are in school too, like, comments get made at school, and, sometimes kids are like, I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to, call attention to myself. And so this campaign hopefully gives people the voice to either say something, or that little blue emoji on your phone, just to show support for something.
So tell me, how did you first get involved in the campaign? What is it that, like, how did you make it a reality? I mean, you've launched billion-dollar campaigns. Mm-hmm. Yep. How has this impacted you personally?
Well, two questions. Let's start with how it impacted me personally. So I work at MindShare. I run a lot of different businesses. Robert Kraft did a very extensive agency-wide request for what agencies does he want to work with. He can work with anyone he wants to, and every agency went in and did their dog and pony show, and we got picked. I was actually in Israel when this whole thing was happening. I was there for a month this summer with my family, and I get this phone call from our CEO, and it's like, hey, you want to work on this campaign? Because I'm very vocal Jewish. I wear it everywhere I am, like, that's who I am. And I was like, sure, I'll work on it. Okay. And I thought, they're like, oh, it's going to be like a little bit of your time. And so, and then all of a sudden I got into it and I was like, oh my God, this is something, guys. Like, and I've, like I said, I've done a lot of amazing things in my career. I've won a lot of awards. This is something that cannot be recreated. What we're doing, how I feel about it, this is all I want to do now. And Matt knows, like, I'm in and I want to solve this with the foundation. And yeah.
So I just wanted to ask you that according to a 2020 study, it said that 11% of US millennial and Gen Z respondents believe that Jews caused the Holocaust. 49% of US millennials and Gen Z respondents have seen Holocaust denial or distortion posts on their own social media or elsewhere online. So help me understand how this campaign works to ensure that we're influencing and educating the minds of all of these youth who are so clearly brainwashed with all of this false propaganda.
We're taking the battle to where they are, in the sense that, you probably seen our ads on TV. What you may not have seen is the extensive amount of play that our ads had on TikTok and had on Instagram and Twitter and other social media channels, because we know that's where the conversation is happening. And that's why we specifically not just worked with major influencers like the people that Shari, mentioned, but are working through another agency with micro influencers, people who have, a couple thousand followers, but are influential in that community and can speak to these people and can really address these issues on their level. If we only, it'd be like just running ads in the New York Times to try to send a message. That's not where students are right now. Students, young people are on their phones. They're on social media. That's where they're getting their news and information. And they're not getting it from trusted sources like we did, through that were journalists or that were, political influencers. They're getting it from celebrities. And so that's where we need to take the fight. That's where we need to provide the education and provide the information that can balance the nonsense and the noise.
I also think that, just to add to that, is I think our message is so different than anything that's been out there in the world ever.
You mean the message asking for help?
Sorry.
You mean the message of asking for help?
Empathy.
We're not asking for help. We're asking for people to stand up to something. So I'll explain that in a second, but where I was going, our message is so different. Most messages that are out there in the world about this topic are very defensive. They're very defensive messages.
True.
We need to be on the offense. We are never going to win if we're constantly on the defense. And we, for the first time, have a very offensive, if we all do this together, we can make this happen message. And that's what makes this campaign so amazing. Sure, we put it in the right places, but that's the tone and the message that no one else has ever said out loud.
And we also brought non-Jewish organizations to the table throughout this process. Unfortunately, too much of the conversation about anti-Semitism has happened Jew to Jew and has not really gone outside our community. We are working with groups like the NAACP, UNIDOS, which is the largest Latin American, Latino organization in the country, LGBTQ groups. We're working with the National Parent Teachers Association, with the League of Women Voters, with AARP. All of these organizations we're partnering with to get the message beyond the echo chamber of the Jewish community and really into other communities that are trusted and that are valued, to raise the level of discourse on this issue, to bring people outside the Jewish community, make them aware, make them educated, and to Shari's point, to show that they have a role to play, that they can be part of the solution to this problem. And we've made it also bite-sized. We're not, there's a reason that our campaign doesn't say stop anti-Semitism or end anti-Semitism. It says stand up, because that's something that we each can play a role in doing. We're not asking each individual person to solve this problem. which feels too big and too daunting. We're asking each person to stand up individually on their own. And that's why the blue square is caught on, because it's simple, it's easy, it's something that you can do, post it on your social media feed, you can, place it on your, text message, whatever you do, it's simple, yet has a real powerful impact. And so we're trying to lower the bar and the barrier to entry so that more people feel that they have a role to play in addressing this issue.
Listen, I've got a kid in college, and I cannot believe what I'm hearing out of the mouth of someone raised in the Jewish day school system, to be honest with you. And one of the concerns that I have, and this is, hopefully you'll be able to address this, is how does the problem of this whole concept of intersectionality, this whole idea that, if you're pro this or against this, then you have to fall into step with everybody else. Can you speak to the concept of intersectionality and how it impacts anti-Semitism?
We have in this country sort of created a culture where every issue is a litmus test, and you have to be aligned with people 100% of the time to be seen as part of the team. We see it playing out in our politics on both sides of the aisle, and the opportunity for nuance, the opportunity for complexity really is diminished. And when you layer on top of that the complexity of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, when you layer on that the complexity of the American Jewish experience right now, that doesn't fit into that yes or no, black or white buckets. And so there is no room on a lot of college campuses for Jews to be complex. They're being asked to be either one thing or another, and that creates that tension. And so what we're doing, and we're certainly not alone, we're working with a wide number of partners in the Jewish community, is to try to inject that complexity and leave room for complexity, and to teach our university administrators and to teach the campus communities who Jews are, what we look like, that, what the Jewish experience is in 2023, and what it means to have a relationship with Israel that doesn't necessarily mean that you support Israeli policy all the time, or that you have a certain positions under things. We're creating that complexity. We're trying to teach that. And the other component of this is that the atmosphere and the infrastructure that has been built mostly on college campuses, but also in large parts of corporate America, to foster diversity, to support diversity, to support people with different life experiences. A lot of that infrastructure is not familiar with the Jewish community, is not familiar with anti-Semitism, and wasn't built to address it. And so what happens is you have these experiences where Jews are feeling targeted, where Jews are feeling isolated or being harassed because of their perspective. And then yet the places where they see others going for recourse to address those types of issues are not open to them. And that creates a sort of second layer of isolation, of victimization. And so it becomes more complex. And so what we're doing, along with a large number of colleagues and partners, is to start to explain this to higher education administrators, to people who are working in these spaces, because I know from my experience on college campuses that Jewish students feel incredibly isolated. They don't feel like they have a safe place to express their values, to express their full identity, and that's creating a lot of tension.
Wow, there's a question from the audience. I'm going to just pause now and put it in for you because I think it's relevant to what we're talking about. She writes, can someone explain to lower tech folks like myself how you post the blue square in your phone text or Facebook page or elsewhere? If not here, it might be helpful to have a link to that advice. Thank you.
We will, I will do a quick tutorial for everybody.
That would be great.
Literally go to your iPhone right now.
Okay, hold it up to the camera. Yeah.
Here's my iPhone. I'm going to go to let's go to my text messages. I'm going to text Matthew Berger right now. Matt, get ready. And so I'm texting Matt Berger. In the bottom, can you guys see my phone? In the
Yeah.
bottom, there's a smiley face.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to touch the smiley face. In the smiley face, do you see here are my most loved emojis? All
Oh,
of those will show up. My second most loved emoji is the blue square after laughing. So then you just touch the blue square.
And if it's
And
not already
now-
in your most loved
Yeah.
emojis, you see it says search emojis, and you could
Or you
just
could,
type
yeah,
blue
I should do
square
that.
there and find the blue.
Or you go to the, sorry, Matt, you're right. I might just use mine all the time. So then you see it says search emoji. You can search blue square, exactly what Matt said before I cut him off. And that's what you can do. You can also do it on your Facebook. If you looked at my LinkedIn page, you can see I think Matt and myself have both added it to our LinkedIn profile. You could add it to your signature. A lot of people in our agency have now added it. You know how we add everything that we support, and we support this and we add it to our signature. So we welcome sharing of the square.
okay.
And
So
just
if
added
someone
it.
else has just written, how is this touching the Jews that don't have a connection to Judaism? The almost self-loathing Jew. I know this sounds bad.
It's a great question. I think there are a lot of Jews who don't speak up because they don't feel educated enough to speak up, that they don't feel empowered. And so that is part of our audience. We want those people to see other Jews addressing this and non-Jews addressing this challenge to help empower them to do the same. Again, low barrier entry. You don't need to speak Hebrew. You don't need to know the prayers. You don't need to. It's as simple as now you know how to post an emoji. It's as simple as posting an emoji to show that you're part of this community or you support this community. And it's also helpful for those people to see others doing it and
Yeah.
feel a sense of community. You
Yeah.
know, somebody said to me when we were rolling this out, well, isn't this just, this isn't going to really do anything. It's not going to, nobody was ever, saved by a rainbow flag. Well, you may not be saved by a rainbow flag, but you know who your allies are. When
That's
you walk into a store or you are talking to someone and they're wearing a rainbow flag pin or they're whatever it is, you know you have an ally. You know that that person has made a conscious decision to be a supporter and an ally. And that's what we're doing. And so we believe that we can help show people in the Jewish community who don't feel empowered to speak up that they have friends and they have allies.
And I think the other thing that we did, I'll say we did really well, Matt, was our creative. So you saw the blue square. I encourage you all to go to YouTube and look at the other 3 commercials that we produced. Those were all real examples of hate. There's one spot where there's a slur on someone's garage door, and the neighbor next door painted it. And the spots always start with something that obviously is negative, but at the end always end very positively about somebody who is not Jewish, or we call allies, coming and helping and standing up to Jewish hate. My point of this whole thing is that the comments that we got about that spot specifically was thank you. Thank you. This happened to me. This happened to my neighbor. I know this, whatever. And then people started coming out of the woodworks and saying, this happens to me. And then and now all of a sudden you have something that makes you be able to, to stand up. And so, we did get one of the amazing parts of the campaign was hearing a lot of, honestly, just thank you for doing this.
Do you think that Jews have internalized that notion of white privilege? I mean, the Jews who believe, I had a young man say to me the other day, I'm ashamed to be a white man. And I said to him, it's a good thing you weren't in the 30s. Somebody would have reminded you how white you're not. What fascinates me at this point is that I see a certain degree of shame, even among our own community, that this could possibly be happening again, that the statute of limitations is up. Because if you don't know your history, you do believe that the Holocaust was the only time. But the truth is that Jew hatred is, we were told, God told us this is what it's going to be. If you look at the biblical narrative, shouldn't be a surprise. And yet I feel like we're more ashamed of it today than we were even in the 30s. Can you speak to that, where you think that comes from?
I think that there is an internal view within the Jewish community to support everyone and to address all of the societal ills, and therefore, unfortunately, there are other communities that have it as bad or worse as the Jewish community, and then so there's a fear of sticking our necks out for that, playing that game, the outrage Olympics of who's got it worse. One of the things that we did very deliberately in our advertisements, our narrative commercials, is that we showcase what anti-Semitism looks like today, and we give statistics that talk about how prevalent it is, but the values that we are reinforcing, the values of how people should be acting when they see anti-Semitism, are universal values. And what we're saying to people is, act the way that when you see anti-Semitism, the way you would if you saw racism, if you saw gender inequality, if you saw hate against the Asian community, the LGBTQ community, the Latino community, whatever it may be. And so we're not trying to separate ourselves from others. We're not trying to say we need the most support or we have it the worst. We're trying to say the conversation that is happening in our society today about justice, about equity, the Jewish community and the fight against anti-Semitism needs to be part of that conversation. And so that's an easier appeal to make than to say this needs to be your top cause.
Mm-hmm. Shari, another question just came in. I'm going to give this one to you first, and then please, Matthew, take it on. How do we as individuals talk to our non-Jewish friends about being allies? There really is no guidance for us to do this. I usually only talk to my Jewish friends about my concerns about anti-Semitism. How do I get over the discomfort to start these conversations? Yes, this is what I mean by the shame. It's an internalized shame, which many marginalized groups have felt and have had to, this is where the word pride comes from, right? Is the idea that you have to turn around that internal sense of self-loathing, which can develop so easily.
Well, I think one thing that is a tool is the content we've created. In when we created the content that we did that, and we're giving those to other organizations, Jewish, non-Jewish, to spark those conversations and have those conversations. So how do you talk about it? You say, hey, have you seen this? Or you share the spot and you say, have you seen this? And I think what we're trying to really say is the world is complex. There's lots on people's plates. There's lots going on. We tried to make this as easy as possible for people to have those conversations and to have those tools. So, I mean, to me, like but it's also like putting my media hat on. When I see good content, I don't care where it's from, I share it with my friends. I'm like, hey, have you seen this spot? Did you like this commercial? What do you think about it? Like, you're nodding your head because we all do it. So that's what I'm saying. We have these assets at everyone's disposal to use and spark that conversation. I mean, I'll say also from the mom standpoint, I'm Jewish. I've raised my children in a very conservative Jewish household. And we've talked about it. We've been to Israel. But you know what? When we did these commercials, when we did these spots, I sat my kids down. Now they've seen it 17 times in the music. They're like, oh, not again, Mom. But like, I sat them down. I'm like, I want you guys to watch these. And I have a almost 13-year-old and an 18-year-old. And I sat down with them and I said, I want you guys to watch these. And they watched them. And I said, has that ever happened to you? Like, there's one about being bullied on social media. I'm like, has that ever happened to you? And they'll say, whatever, yes. And that's sparking a conversation with your kids. Like, people, I think that's the other thing, is that like hatred is generational. And we need to break that, Jews and non-Jews. It's generational. And
what do you mean by that? I'm sorry, I don't understand that statement.
Meaning, like, if you hear things from your parents and your grandparents, and then you believe it and you pass that on. And so, like, if you're being raised to not like a certain group, you just believe that's the way it is because your parents and your grandparents felt that way. but the commercials or the social posts or any of the commentary that, or go to the website, the Stand Up Jewish Hate site. Those are tools to spark conversations. Please use them. That's why we created them.
How do we get them? How do we get these assets?
Standuptojewishhate.org.
Standuptojewishhate.org.
Judy will put it in the
Yeah.
chat right now. Stand Up
Let
to
me
Jewish Hate.
make a couple of comments. One regarding something Shari just said regarding generational changes. You know, as someone growing up, you know, as a young gay person 25 years ago, terms like gay and queer and fag were used day in and day out. And because not because people were homophobic, some were, but most people weren't seeing that that was hurting people and didn't recognize that. But over time, as we educated, the language shifted, because there was education that was done to make people aware that those words were powerful and had a negative impact on real people. And I believe that a lot of the anti-Semitic tropes and a lot of the things that are said, not because people are of malintent, but innocuously, or because it's been ingrained in them bit by bit, that's what we can start to chip away at. We can start to chip away at those underlying things that perhaps in isolation, each one don't have much impact. But when you hear them again and again and again, they have power and they create stereotypes. And in the wrong person's hands can actually create misperceptions and stereotypes that can lead to violence. And so we need to be able to address these issues at the core. And one other point that I want to make is, you know, I was in the car the other day with one of my good friends and her friend who I hadn't met. And so we were having that sort of initial conversation. Who are you? What do you do? And she said, what do you do? And I said, I work for an organization. I work for a foundation. Oh, what does the foundation do? Oh, we are addressing anti-Semitism. And she said, oh, you know, I've been reading more about that. I didn't know that it was a big deal, but I'm hearing more about it. Have you seen those ads that have been, so that hit me right here. And it was like, but what it did was, I was having a conversation with somebody who wasn't Jewish, and I didn't have to teach them that anti-Semitism was a problem. We could start having a conversation, skipping that first part and going into how do we talk about it from a place where there's a recognition that anti-Semitism is a problem. And that when you walk into, whether it's the office of a congressman and want to talk about addressing anti-Semitism, when you don't have to teach them that anti-Semitism is a problem, but instead can start with how do we solve this together? Or you walk into the group or to, you know, addressing Black-Jewish relations, or working with, you know, your school and saying, I want to talk about how do we do anti-Semitism education. If we're doing that first step of educating people outside the Jewish community that this is a problem, that makes every conversation that follows a little bit easier.
So absolutely true. Shari, you mentioned being a mom. Can you talk a little bit about how to help, you know, parents of kindergarten to say 12, Jewish studies, Jewish students, their parents, you know, the younger crowd, college, we, you know, obviously we know, but you know, there is these kids are going to see stuff on social media themselves. So,
right. And like I'm going to go back to just my personal example of sitting down with them, talking about that. I think we also, what we're sometimes a little bit missing, especially to maybe, as you mentioned, Adrian, I think you were the one who said, you know, the Jews who might not feel so connected, to their Judaism, but we have to instill this Jewish pride. Again, like what happened to that? What happened to being proud of being Jewish? What happened, you know, and so, you know, we have to make kids at a young age feel that pride of being, of being Jewish, you know, like my daughter, for example, she spent a month in Israel. And like I said, very conservative, had bat mitzvah, like the whole 9 yards. And she got back from her trip from Israel, and every morning she takes her Jewish star out and she puts it on the outside of her sweater. And you know what? I cry, and it just makes me, and because she's proud. So like however your family feels proud, like we have to do that for our kids too. And we,
Matthew, what do you say to that, to the younger crowd?
I think we have to, well, first of all, I think Shari's absolutely right. That's part of the reason why we partnered with Jewish American Heritage Month, because we believe part of this conversation is instilling pride in Jewish experience, in teaching people about Jewish history, about who the Jewish community is today, and in protecting the Jewish community in the future by fighting anti-Semitism. They see that as part of their mission. We see instilling Jewish pride as part of ours. So it was a natural partnership that we've worked on throughout this month of May that ends tomorrow. And we want Jewish American Heritage Month to be a bigger thing. We need to help our students understand how to bring their friends along with them, to teach them in ways that that educate the full campus community. And we need as parents, I'm not a parent, but we need parents to go into schools and say, this is a problem. There needs to be anti-Semitism education, there needs to be Holocaust education, the same way that we talk about addressing racial justice, the same way we talk about awareness for LGBTQ issues. We need to really talk about the fact that without this type of underlying education, we allow tropes, we allow stereotypes, we allow misinformation, and we allow for isolation to fester. And so it's really about empowering teachers, empowering school districts to have these conversations because they have to happen. And the other thing is we have to talk to students where they're really getting their education, and we have to not allow voices of hate to be louder than voices of hope. We have to be using our resources, our connections, our voices to be louder than those that want to spew hate.
So beautifully put. I'm going to ask both of you before we wrap to address our viewers, address the over 24,000 women around the world who have been part of the Momentum experience and their friends and allies. What is your ultimate hope that this will accomplish, and how can we help make that happen? Shari, perhaps you can go first, and then Matthew will end with you.
I'm not going to go say we're trying to eradicate hate. That's not what we're trying to do here. What I want out of this is a conversation. That's what I want. I want people to have a conversation. I want everything that Matt and I have been talking about, like talking to your kids, talking to your administrators at school. I want that conversation to spark that anti-Semitism is acknowledged as much as a form of intolerance as others out there. That's what I want for now. I'll get back to you after that. It's solved.
And Matthew?
I think we want to empower people to have those conversations. We want to empower everyone to see their own role that they can play in standing up to Jewish hate. And that can mean just posting a blue square on social media. It can mean engaging with your friends and your network. We all have networks of both Jews and non-Jews that we connect with on a daily. We show them our vacation photos. We tell them, what we're doing professionally. Take a moment and tell them why this is important to you. Tell them why, that you want them to work with you to address anti-Semitism. If we each do that, if we each share with our network, the message gets louder, it gets extrapolated, fervor and fervor. And that's really what we want people to do. We want people to take ownership of fighting anti-Semitism, because unless we're all committed to it, and unless we all raise the issue, we're not going to make a dent in it. And so we're just really heartened by the number of people, the number of organizations and influencers that have answered that call, and we know that's only going to continue.
Wow. I can't thank you enough, really, for your insights and your time, and to the viewers for their comments and their questions. It's painful. I have to say that I find this painful for so many reasons. And yet I feel like there's some hope here. And I do love that you're taking this to a higher level. The playing field is not defensive so much as it is offensive, but not in an offensive way. And I'm really hoping that everyone is going to pass this information along to your loved ones and incorporate it into your life. A simple blue square bring up the conversation, please. I can't stress enough how terrifying this can become for our children if we don't stand up right now. So from myself, Adrian, and from all of us at Momentum, please remember that as we learn and grow together, that the highest form of wisdom will always be kindness. Thank you, and good night, everyone.